Lumber days in Oconto County. Before the days of lumbering, Oconto County was heavily forested with white pine, hemlock, and hardwood. John P. Arndt had the first sawmill in Oconto County. It was powered by water and was located in present-day Pensacola. David Jones purchased land 2 miles from the mouth of the Oconto River and powered a single whipsaw by means of a water wheel. He and his sons put the first logs into the Oconto River for manufactured items such as boats and buildings. Sailing vessels carried lumber to Fort Howard, Milwaukee, and Chicago. This is the Alvin Clark, believed to have been on its way to Oconto to pick up lumber when it sank in a storm in 1864. In 1859, Jacob Spies bought the Jones Steam Mill, located near the mouth of the Oconto River. Sawdust and wood scraps were burned to heat water for the steam-powered saws. This lantern, now in the Oconto County Museum, hung over the big saw of the Spies Mill. Large boarding houses were built for mill workers. Samuel Gilkey brought a circle saw to Oconto that is believed to be the first one used in the Midwest. Other sawdust cities, as mill centers were called, grew in the county. This mill in Oconto Falls replaced the small one built by John Volk in 1847. In 1910, a sulfate mill was constructed in Oconto Falls. It is believed the first kraft paper made in the United States was produced in Oconto Falls. The shingle mill at Suring was built by M. W. Wagner of Bonduelle. Lena had a planing mill. Rough planks were shaped and smoothed into finished wood. One of the earliest mills in Oconto was the Anson Eldred Mill, located on McDonald Street, on the site where Jefferson School was later built. George Farnsworth bought a mill lumber company in Oconto and developed it into the Oconto Company, one of the largest in the county. He contributed generously to the growth of his community and donated this well-built library in Oconto. O. A. Ellis, superintendent of the Oconto Company, was active in county affairs. He served on the county board 44 years. John Noonan was another longtime employee of the Oconto Company. In the 1860s, Uri Balcom and D.R. Holt joined interests and formed the Holt and Balcom Company. In 1888, Holt bought out the Balcom interest in the growing company, located on the north bank of the Oconto River, between Superior and Park Avenues in Oconto. W. A. Holt, son of the founder, was with the company more than 50 years. William Young, a man who had just served in the Civil War, arrived in Oconto in 1866. He became the superintendent of the Holt Company, a position he held for many years. More mills were constructed, some to become large, profitable ones. Others burned, including the Anson Eldred Mill of Stiles. This photo is believed to be one of the oldest taken in Oconto County. The Oconto River was dammed in several places to create mill ponds. These earth and wooden dams were on sandy riverbeds and would break or go out, creating floods downriver. There were 6 mills in Oconto at one time. By 1900, the companies in Oconto were manufacturing almost 60 million feet of lumber per year. The Holt Company and the Oconto Company continued to operate until all the timber was cut in the 1930s. Timekeepers, bookkeepers, and business managers were vital in large lumber companies. This is the Holt office in Oconto. The office was constructed in 1854 by Samuel Gilkey on land purchased from Thomas Millage. Today it is listed on the National Register of Historic Sites. As the lumber industry expanded in the 1800s, timber was cut farther back from the river, and it became necessary to establish camps in the woods. One camp that stands today is the oldest that remains on its original site. It had deteriorated over the years, but the Lions Club of Lakewood and Townsend began restoring it in 1976. McCaslin Brook, named for Matt McCaslin, early lumberman, flows next to the camp, which is located near Lakewood. The first cook, sometimes called the shanty boss, and his assistants, the bull cook and cookies, had little time to relax. They were up before 4 a.m. The bull cook, whose main job was to cut firewood and tend the stoves, rang the triangle to call the men to eat. Some camps had a Gabriel, a long horn used to call the men to meals. While the cookies watched the tables and kept the plates and teapots full, the first cook was already starting to prepare the next meal. The men were not permitted to talk as they ate because the cooks wanted them out in 15 minutes. Noon meals were taken to the men in the woods if they were working too far to come to camp. Lunch included beef or pork, beans, pies, and cakes. Entertainment was provided by some of the lumberjacks. Cooks had to manage with whatever supplies they had. One old-time cook put it this way: "Prunes make better apple pies than peaches do." Food was all important. A bad cook was called a belly robber. Lumberjack words or lingo varied from place to place. Supper was the lightest meal of the day. Soup, hash, cornbread, fruit, pudding, cookies, and sometimes salted fish were served at the end of the working day. With sweaty socks drying and a room full of men who hadn't bathed for weeks, the smell in the bunkhouse was unpleasant. A team of sawyers was expected to cut an average of about 100 logs per day of white pine, depending on the size of the trees. Lumber cruisers, men who found the best stands of trees to cut, could estimate the value of a stand of trees and also the board footage the trees would produce. At first, trees were cut close to the rivers, but as the woods were cut, cruisers had to go into the deep woods. When lumbering began, only the largest and best trees were cut. A tree 14 inches thick produced 3,000 to 4,000 board feet of lumber. Sleighs and steam log haulers used the rough roads made by swampers, men who cut roads into the woods. An icer sprinkled the logging roads in winter. Heavily loaded sleds could glide along these ice paths. Occasionally, sleds got out of control and slammed into the team pulling it, sometimes killing a driver and team. Steep hills between the logging area and the river caused problems. Loads had to be pulled up and lowered down the other side to prevent accidents. The steam log hauler was a tremendous invention for the logging industry. This wood-burning steam engine could haul 10 sleigh loads of logs out of the woods. Stamping hammers were used to mark each company's logs. The hammers had raised letters. When the end of a log was struck, the letters were stamped into it. This one, A.E., belonged to the Anson Eldred Company of Stiles. River drivers floated logs to the mill. These skilled lumberjacks, with their peavey or cant hooks, could keep thousands of logs moving. Several lumber companies decided to have one river boss or foreman in charge of their log drives. Gus Cole was known as one of the best river drivers in the area. At times there were log jams in spite of the men's expert ability to keep the logs moving. Jumping from log to log, the men pushed and pried to move the key logs. If they could not break the jam, it was dynamited loose. The railroad opened more areas for logging. There was no passenger service in those early days, but there were riders, including these berry pickers. Millions of feet of lumber have been taken out of Wisconsin forests since the first loads were lifted onto railroad cars. Lumberjacks worked long, hard hours in bitter cold and mosquito-plagued summers to bring out the timber. Oconto County provided lumber for houses, such as Elmwood, an early-day home in Oconto, and building materials for industry throughout the Midwest. W.B. Mitchell was an early Oconto furniture and coffin builder. George LaChapelle also worked with wood. He carved many intricate pieces. Oconto County continues to produce pulpwood for paper, plywood, and other products.